There is an old saying among the wolf packs of the northern reaches. The moon gives, the moon takes, and sometimes, just to amuse herself, the moon does both at the same time. No one understood this better than Seren of Ashwood. She was an Omega, and before anyone dares to imagine some trembling, soft-spoken creature who flinched at loud noises and apologized for existing, let's be very clear about what kind of Omega Seren was. She had broken a man's jaw with her elbow at 15. She had survived 3 brutal winters alone in the Blackwood Forest after her pack was slaughtered. She had stolen a war horse from a beta soldier twice her size, looked him dead in the eye as she rode away, and said, and these were her exact words, "You should have tied it better." Seren was an Omega the way a blade is a blade. Quietly dangerous, unassuming in appearance, absolutely devastating upon contact. She did not know, on the morning our story begins, that the moon had something spectacular planned for her. Something infuriating. Something devastating. Something that would come in the form of 6 feet and 4 inches of insufferable, gold-eyed, broad-shouldered Alpha King, who was, by every law of fate and cosmic irony, her mate. She was going to be furious. He was going to be undone. And the entire kingdom of Duskmere was going to have a very interesting several months. Chapter 1. The kingdom of Duskmere stretched from the frost-bitten cliffs of the northern reaches to the amber wheat fields of the southern flats, and it was, by most accounts, a kingdom that ran entirely on power, bloodlines, and the unspoken understanding that Omegas were at the bottom of all 3. The hierarchy of wolf kind was not subtle. Alphas ruled. Betas served. Omegas existed. They were the healers, the servants, the quiet ones tucked into the corners of great halls. They were meant to be soft-spoken and gentle and grateful for whatever crumbs the upper ranks allowed to fall their way. Someone had clearly forgotten to explain this to Seren. She arrived in the market town of Briarfen on a gray Tuesday morning with a stolen cloak, 2 copper coins, and a rabbit she had trapped herself, which she intended to trade for a warm meal and, if the fates were generous, a pair of boots that did not have a hole in the left sole. She was 22 years old, and she had been alone for 7 years. 7 years since the Ashwood massacre. 7 years since she had watched her pack, her mother, her people, torn apart by the soldiers of the Hollow Crown, the old regime that had ruled Duskmere before the current king took the throne. 7 years of surviving on instinct and stubbornness and a fury so deep and so constant that it had long since stopped feeling like fury and simply felt like breathing. She did not think about the past often. It was not productive. What was productive was getting those boots. The market of Briarfen was loud and smelled strongly of fish, bread, and the kind of desperation that accumulates in towns that have been taxed 3 harvests in a row. Seren moved through it the way she moved through everything, head slightly down, senses fully alert, cataloging exits and threats with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned early that the world did not warn you before it tried to kill you. She found the cobbler's stall between a woman selling dried herbs and an old man who appeared to be asleep standing up. The cobbler was a heavy-set beta man named Orton, who looked at Seren, looked at her rabbit, looked at her feet, and said, with the world-weariness of a man who had seen too much, "Omega. Traveling alone." "Clearly," Seren said. "Not safe," he said. "King soldiers are through here every few days now. They're rounding up unregistered Omegas." Seren went very still. "Rounding them up for what?" she asked, her voice betraying nothing. Orton shrugged, already reaching for her rabbit. "Palace service, they say. King Caius needs them for the new Omega registry. Some law he passed last month. Every Omega in Duskmere is to be catalogued, assigned to a household, given work. He said it like it was news. He said it like it was perhaps mildly inconvenient. Seren said nothing because what she was thinking was not appropriate for a public market. She had heard of King Caius. Everyone had heard of King Caius. He had taken the throne 4 years ago after leading the rebellion that brought down the Hollow Crown, the same regime that had destroyed her pack. There were people who called him a liberator, a hero, the wolf who had restored order to Duskmere. Seren had exactly one opinion about powerful men who restored order to things, and that opinion was that order tended to look very different depending on which end of it you were standing on. An Omega registry. She took her boots, which were, to Orton's credit, quite good boots, and she walked out of the market with a rabbit's worth of copper, the knowledge that she had just become significantly more hunted than she already was, and the particular kind of calm that only comes to people who have already lost everything once and have therefore stopped being afraid of losing things. She was halfway down the road out of Briarfen when she heard the horses. 8 of them, Royal Guard, from the crest on their armor, a silver wolf mid-howl against a black field, which was the sigil of King Caius. They were moving through the market behind her, and she could hear the authoritative bark of their captain ordering the stalls to be checked. Seren did not run. Running attracted attention. She walked. Purposefully, calmly, with the very specific energy of someone who absolutely had somewhere to be and was absolutely not an unregistered Omega and absolutely did not need to be stopped. She made it to the edge of the market. She turned the corner. She ran. She ran very fast, which was one of the advantages of being an Omega, who had spent 7 years being chased by things that wanted to kill her. She had gotten extremely good at running. She vaulted a fence, cut through a baker's yard, startled a goat that expressed its feelings loudly, scrambled up a stone wall, and dropped down the other side into an alley just as the sound of hooves rounded the corner she had been standing at 30 seconds before. She pressed herself against the stone, completely still, and waited. The horses clattered past. She let out a long, slow breath. And then a hand closed around her arm from behind, and a voice said, very quietly, directly behind her ear, "Don't scream." "I'm not one of them." Seren did not scream. She also did not panic, or freeze, or any of the things one might reasonably do when grabbed in an alley by a stranger. What she did was grab the hand on her arm, twist sharply, pivot, and have her elbow at the stranger's throat in approximately 1 second, which she thought was actually one of her better times. The stranger, a young woman, slight, with dark skin and clever eyes and the particular expression of someone who deeply regrets their recent life choices, made a strangled noise and raised both hands. "I said don't scream," the woman wheezed. "I did not say assault me." "I don't scream," Seren said, not moving the elbow. "Who are you?" "My name is Dessa. I'm an Omega. Like you. I was going to offer to help you hide." "A beat." "Like me, how?" Seren said. "You can smell it?" "I could smell you from across the market," Dessa said, with a frankness that might have been offensive under different circumstances. Fresh air and pine, and that very specific scent that Omegas have that makes alphas act like they've lost their minds. "No offense." Seren lowered her elbow. "Where?" she said. Dessa smiled, which transformed her face from clever to almost radiant. "Follow me. And try not to elbow anyone else on the way." Dessa led her through the back lanes of Briarfen to a tannery that had clearly not been used for tanning in some time, and which now housed, in its cavernous back room, 7 other Omegas. They ranged in age from a girl who could not have been more than 12, small and hollow-eyed, clutching a worn cloth doll, to an elderly woman named Hesta, who was probably 60 and looked at Seren with the appraising expression of someone who has lived long enough to not be impressed by much. "Another stray," Hester observed. "She nearly took my throat out," Dessa said cheerfully. "I like her." Seren looked at the assembled group. She counted the exits: 2 doors, 3 windows, 1 hatch in the floor that was probably a root cellar. She noted the rations in the corner. Enough for perhaps 4 days, maybe 5 if they stretched it. She noted the way the 12-year-old was watching her with huge, serious eyes, and the way the other Omegas were positioned, protective, close together, the way pack animals cluster when there is something to fear. Something tightened in her chest. She ignored it. "How long have you been here?" she asked. 3 weeks for me," Dessa said. "The others longer. The soldiers have been sweeping the towns for 2 months. Anyone without papers, anyone who can't prove they're registered to a household, they're taken." "To the palace?" Seren said. Dessa's expression shifted. "The ones taken to the palace, yes. But not all of them come back. And the ones who do—" She paused. "They don't speak of it." The room was very quiet. Seren thought about King Caius and his Omega registry, and the particular kind of anger she felt was the cold kind, which was always more dangerous than the hot kind. "I'm not staying long," she said, which she believed when she said it. She was wrong. She would stay for 3 months, and it would change everything. Before we continue, I'd like you to let me know in the comment section where you are currently watching this story from. Also, do not forget to like and hit the subscribe button for more interesting werewolf romance stories. Chapter 2. King Caius of Duskmere did not sleep well. This was not a new development. He had not slept well since he was 19 years old and had watched his father executed in the courtyard of the old palace by the regime he would spend the next 6 years destroying. Sleep had never really recovered from that particular evening. What he did instead of sleeping was work and ride. And on nights when the moon was full and the stone walls of the palace felt too close and the crown on its stand beside his bed seemed to emit some quiet, oppressive gravity, he shifted. He left his human skin behind and he ran, 4-legged, gold-furred, massive, through the old-growth forest that bordered the palace grounds, until his lungs burned and his mind went quiet, and for a few merciful hours he was not a king but simply a wolf, which was a significantly less complicated thing to be. He was returning from one such run on the morning that would begin to unravel him, shifting back at the edge of the tree line, reaching for the shirt he had left folded on a rock, when his beta general, a scarred and deeply unflappable man named Brennan, was waiting for him with his arms crossed and the particular expression he wore when delivering news he knew would not be received well. "Brennan," Caius said. "My lord," Brennan said. "It is before dawn." "Yes. You have that face." "I am not sure which face you mean, my lord." "The face," Caius said, pulling his shirt on. "That means something has gone wrong and you are trying to decide how to make it sound like it hasn't." Brennan had served under Caius for 8 years. He was 43 years old, had survived 3 wars and 1 failed assassination attempt, and was still somehow occasionally startled by how perceptive his king was. "There is a situation in the Briarfen district," Brennan said. "The Omega sweeps?" "Complications. Captain Moores reports that there is a group of unregistered Omegas sheltering in the district. His unit has been unable to locate them despite 3 weeks of searching." Caius pulled on his coat. The moon was still high and pale above them, and its light made the dew on the grass look like scattered silver. "Unable to locate them," he said. 12 soldiers cannot locate a group of Omegas hiding in a market town. Apparently one of the group has been Brennan paused, actively frustrating their efforts. Caius looked at him.
She
redirected Captain Moores into a pig pen, my lord. On 2 separate occasions. And on the 3rd, she somehow convinced his unit that they had already searched the building they were about to search, and they left. A pause. She redirected him into a pig pen, Caius said. Twice, Brennan said. And there, just for a moment, something shifted in King Caius's expression. It was not quite a smile. It was the ghost of one, the shape that a smile leaves behind when the person wearing it has decided they are not allowed to have it. Send a different unit, he said. I already have, my lord. They report similar results. Caius looked at the sky. He thought about an Omega who could outmaneuver 2 units of royal soldiers in a market town, and he thought this in a way that was entirely logical and strategic and absolutely not intrigued. I'll go myself, he said. Brennan stared at him. My lord, he said, with the careful tone of a man choosing his words very deliberately, you are the king. I'm aware. Kings do not personally ride to market towns to collect unregistered Omegas. This king does, apparently, Caius said, and walked back toward the palace. Brennan stood in the dewy grass in the early morning light and thought, not for the first time, that his king was going to give him gray hair before he was 50. He already had quite a lot of it. Caius told himself, on the 2-day ride to Briarfen, that this was a practical decision. The Omega Registry was his law. Its implementation was his responsibility. There had been complications with how it was being received, rumors, resistance, whispers of cruelty that he had not intended and was actively trying to address. Going himself was a statement of personal oversight. Nothing more. He told himself this with great conviction. He told himself this when they arrived at Briarfen in the thin gray light of early morning, and he dismounted and felt, immediately and without explanation, that strange pull. Not toward any direction he could name, just toward. A tugging, low and constant, like a current under still water. Like a thread. He ignored it. He was good at ignoring things. He sent his soldiers through the market in plain clothes and positioned himself at the northern road with Brennan, watching, and said very little. He was watching the road when Brennan touched his arm. My lord, Brennan said, very quietly. Caius turned. There was a young woman crossing the market square. She was not doing anything remarkable. She was walking. She was carrying a basket, which she had clearly acquired just now from a vendor, and she was wearing a cloak that was 2 sizes too large and boots that were clearly new. She had dark hair that she had tied back with the careless efficiency of someone who considers hair a minor inconvenience. She had a face that was, and Caius noted this observation with the clinical distance of a man who is absolutely not affected, striking. Not conventionally beautiful in the way of court women with their powdered skin and arranged expressions. Something sharper. Something with too much intelligence behind the eyes and too much tension in the jaw. She was scanning the square. Not browsing.
Not shopping.
Mapping. She was mapping the exits with the practiced ease of someone who does it everywhere, automatically, as naturally as breathing. And even as Caius watched, even as he felt that strange pull intensify with every step she took without looking at him, he saw it. The exact moment she clocked the plainclothes soldiers. The microscopic change in her stride. The way her eyes moved to the north road.
To him.
Their eyes met. And the world, for one breathless, completely inconvenient moment, simply stopped. Caius felt it like a physical blow, like sound hitting stone, like the full weight of the moon dropping into his chest and taking up residence there. The bond. Recognition. His wolf surged so hard it nearly staggered him. This massive, deep, animal certainty that did not care at all about kings or laws or the politics of rank.
Mate.
The woman across the square had very clearly felt it too, because she had gone completely still, and her expression, this was the part Caius would remember later, in the dark of his room, staring at the ceiling. Her expression was not awe. It was not wonder. It was not the soft-eyed, tender recognition that the old songs described when mates found each other. It was absolute, undisguised fury. She looked at him like the universe had just done something personally offensive to her. And then she looked away, hitched her basket higher on her arm, and walked in the exact opposite direction with the determined pace of someone who has decided to simply not participate in what is happening. Caius stood very still for a moment. "My lord," Brennan said, "is everything." "Find the tannery," Caius said, his voice perfectly even. "The Omegas are in the old tannery on the South Lane. Don't frighten the children." He paused. "The woman with the dark hair. Do not touch her. Do not approach her. If your men see her, they are to stand down." Brennan looked at him. Brennan was, as previously established, quite perceptive for a general. "Yes, my lord," he said carefully. Caius turned and walked after her. Chapter 3. Seren walked very fast. She walked with the focus and intentionality of someone performing an act of profound denial, and the denial was this. She had not just felt what she had just felt. The bond recognition was a story, a myth, a thing that happened to other people in songs and not to unregistered Omegas on the run in market towns. And it had absolutely, certainly, under no circumstances happened with him. She knew who he was. She had known the moment her eyes met his, because she had seen his face on the proclamation posters nailed to every town board from here to the northern reaches. That face that the proclamation artists had tried to render noble and regal and had instead made simply severe. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, the gold eyes that were apparently distinctive enough to be mentioned in every written account of him. King Caius. Her mate was King Caius. The universe, Seren thought with a clarity that was almost impressive, had the worst sense of humor she had ever encountered. She turned down a lane, then another, moving purely on instinct now, her mind going through options at speed. She could leave. She could be out of Briarfen within the hour, back into the forest, gone. She had done it before. She was good at gone. But the group at the tannery.
Dessa.
The 12-year-old with the cloth doll. She stopped walking. She turned around. He was directly behind her. She had not heard him, which was, she would not admit this, actually impressive. A man that large, moving that quietly. He had kept perhaps 10 feet of distance, and he stopped when she stopped, and they stood in the narrow lane looking at each other in the thin morning light, and Seren thought, all right, fine. You're either very good at following people, she said, or you've had a lot of practice having people run from you.
A beat.
Something shifted in those gold eyes.
Both, he said.
His voice was, she catalogued this purely clinically, low. Even. The kind of voice that had been trained to carry across rooms full of people without ever having to raise itself. Also deeply, inconveniently appealing, but she was ignoring that. You're the king, she said. Yes. And you came personally. To collect unregistered Omegas from a market town. I did. That's either dedicated governance or very poor use of royal time. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite name. Not offense. Not amusement. Something in between that was neither and both. You redirected Captain Moores into a pig pen, he said.
Twice, she said. Twice, he agreed.
She waited. He deserved it both times, she added, because it seemed like relevant information. There was again that ghost of a smile. There and gone. Like he had rules about it. The Omega Registry, she said. Is that what this is? You come to market towns and personally collect people who haven't registered. I come to personally ensure that my law is implemented correctly, he said. There have been reports of cruelty, she said. I've heard. What kind of king passes a law and then is surprised when his soldiers are cruel? The air between them changed. Something sharpened. The kind, Caius said quietly, who is still working on the gap between intent and execution. She looked at him. He did not look away. He was watching her with that steady, unnerving attention, and she was very aware, too aware, furiously aware, of the bond humming between them like a plucked string, wanting her to step forward, wanting her to close the distance. She took a deliberate step back. I'm not going to register, she said. You're in violation of. I know what I'm in violation of, she said. I've been in violation of various laws since I was 15, and I am still standing, which is more than I can say for most of the laws. Seren, he said. She stopped. He had said her name. He could not have known her name. She had not given it, had not introduced herself, had given no one in this town her real name. He watched her put this together. You know who I am, she said. I know you are Seren of Ashwood, he said. Last survivor of the Ashwood pack. I have known about you for 3 years. The ground shifted slightly under her. She kept her face very still. You've been looking for me, she said. I've been looking for you, he confirmed. Before today. Before the market. Yes. She considered this. She considered it with the part of her mind that was still functional despite the bond pulling at her like a tide. Why? She said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, because the men who destroyed your pack were working under orders they should never have been given. And I needed to find you to tell you that myself. Seren had not expected that. She had been prepared for a great many things from King Caius. Arrogance, authority, the casual dismissiveness that powerful people tended to wear like a second skin. She had not been prepared for that. She said nothing for a long moment. Who gave the order? She said finally. The Hollow Council. Specifically, their second in command, a man named Braith. He believed Ashwood was harboring rebel fighters. Ashwood had farmers, Seren said. My mother had a garden. I know, he said. The silence between them was a different kind of silence now. Braith is dead, Seren said. It was not a question. Yes. He was executed in the 3rd year of the rebellion. It did not undo what he did. No, she said. It doesn't. She looked up at the narrow stripe of sky visible between the building tops above them. Gray. The kind of gray that meant rain by afternoon. What do you want from me? She said. Caius looked at her. And this time he did not hedge, did not manage his expression into careful blankness. At the moment, he said, I am trying very hard to want the appropriate thing. Seren looked at him sharply. He met her eyes. Steady. Honest. The kind of honesty that costs something. And the appropriate thing, she said slowly, is what exactly? You walk me back to the palace? Register me? Assign me to some noble household to pour wine and be invisible? No, he said. Then what? I don't know yet, he said. I wasn't expecting this. She stared at him. The king of Duskmere, she said, with a flatness that was somehow also witheringly expressive, the man who passed the Omega Registry law, did not have a plan for finding his mate in a market town. No, he agreed. I did not account for this specific scenario. Incredible, Seren said. I'm aware. You run an entire kingdom. Yes. And you have no plan. I have a great many plans, he said, with a flash of something that was almost prickly. None of them involved today. She looked at him for a long, silent moment. He looked back. The bond stretched between them like the moment before lightning falls, charged, inevitable, deeply inconvenient. The group at the tannery, Seren said. All of them. They go free. Unregistered, unassigned, free to go wherever they choose. You will not send your soldiers after them. Caius was quiet for a moment. In exchange for what? He said. In exchange for me not walking into that forest and disappearing for another 7 years, during which time you will continue to have no plan and redirect nobody into pig pens. A pause. Very long. Done, he said. Seren nodded. Once, the decisive nod of someone who is closing a negotiation and absolutely not thinking about anything else. Good, she said. Now. I'm going to go tell Dessa she can leave, and you're going to make sure your soldiers stand down. And then she stopped. And then, he said. She met his eyes. The bond was a living thing between them, and she was furious at it. And she was also, she would not tell him this, not yet, perhaps not ever, not entirely surprised. Something in the oldest part of her had known, the moment she saw him across that square. She had just been hoping she was wrong. And then, she said, we'll figure out the rest. Separately for now. And slowly. Slowly, he said, and there was something in the word. Relief, almost, as if he had not wanted her to run. Don't look relieved, she told him. I'm still furious about this. I know, he said. You passed a terrible law. I'm beginning to think so, yes. You will fix it. That was already my intention. Good. She turned to go, then stopped, her back to him. Caius. Yes. The next time you follow someone down a lane, she said, perhaps lead with your name, not your crown. She walked away. He stood in the lane and felt, for the first time in a very long time, the very strange sensation of being completely off balance and finding it, unexpectedly, entirely against his will, something close to interesting. Chapter 4. She came to the palace 3 weeks later. She told herself this was strategic. The group at the tannery had dispersed safely. Dessa had wept, briefly, and then composed herself and set off toward the eastern territories with a kind of purposeful stride that suggested she would be entirely fine. The 12-year-old, whose name was Pip, had been taken in by a Beta family in the next town, which Seren had arranged with the combined force of her personality and the written decree Caius had provided before he rode back to the palace. She had his handwriting memorized from that decree. This was not relevant information. She was simply observant. She came to the palace because the bond was getting louder. Because every night it pulled toward north, toward him, like a compass needle that had decided magnetic north was now somewhere inside the palace of Duskmere, specifically in whatever room the king slept in. Because she had 7 years of sleeping alone in forests and she was tired, and for the first time in a very long time something felt like, she did not have a better word for it, home. She hated that word. She was furious at it. She came to the palace, and the guards at the gate, who had clearly been told to expect her, opened it without a word, which she found both efficient and slightly annoying because she had prepared a speech. Brennan met her in the courtyard. He was exactly as she had imagined him from the way Caius spoke to him, solid, scarred, watchful, with the quiet authority of a man who has kept someone else alive for long enough that he now considers it his primary purpose. Seren of Ashwood, he said. Brennan of the perpetually concerned expression, she returned. He blinked. He didn't tell me you were like this, Brennan said. What did he tell you? That you were. He paused, choosing carefully. Formidable. He used exactly that word? He used that word, and several others I've chosen to leave out. She almost smiled. Which room? Brennan led her through the palace, which was, she noted with some surprise, nothing like the cold, imposing fortress she had imagined. It was stone, yes, and the ceilings were high, but there were fires lit in the corridors and tapestries on the walls that looked genuinely old rather than decorative, and the servants they passed moved with the ease of people who were not afraid. That, she thought, told her something. He was in the war room, which was perhaps the least romantic location possible for a first real conversation between mates, but somehow seemed appropriate. He was standing at a long table covered in maps and parchment, and he was speaking to two advisors in low, quick tones, and he had not heard her come in. For 3 seconds, he did not know she was there, and she stood in the doorway and looked at him, without the charged electricity of the market lane, without the awareness of being watched, and thought, there he is. That's who he is, when no one is looking. He looked tired. Not the dramatic exhaustion of someone making a point of it, but the deep, specific tiredness of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has forgotten what it felt like to put it down. She knew that kind of tired. Then he looked up. His expression, she filed this away very carefully, went through approximately 4 things in under 2 seconds.
Surprise.
Something sharp and bright that he immediately tried to contain. A steadiness that settled over him like armor. And then underneath all of it, just visible if you were looking for it, relief. Leave us, he said to the advisors. They left, with the slightly scandalized haste of people who understood that something significant was happening and wanted to be able to say later that they had witnessed the moment. Seren stepped into the room. I'm not here because of the bond, she said, immediately, preemptively, because she felt this was important to establish. All right, he said. I'm here because the bond is going to be an inconvenience for both of us if I'm on the other end of the kingdom, and I've decided the most efficient thing is to deal with it directly.
Efficient, he said.
Yes. You've decided our situation is a matter of efficiency. I've decided, she said, that most problems are best addressed directly. And this is a problem. You consider this a problem. You consider it differently? He looked at her across the table of maps. I consider it, he stopped. Started again. I consider it the first thing in 4 years that has made me feel less like a king and more like a person, which is either a problem or not, depending on how you look at it. The room was very quiet. You could have had any noble Omega in the kingdom, she said. The words came out more directly than she intended. Yes, he said. You could have had someone appropriate. Someone who fits this. She gestured at the palace around them. Yes, he said again. And instead, he said, the moon apparently has opinions. She looked at him sharply. And something cracked, slightly, some edge of her carefully maintained composure, because he had said it with that same edge of rueful exasperation that she felt, that exact feeling of finding your life moving in a direction you did not choose and being too honest to pretend otherwise. She bit the inside of her cheek. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? Someone much more regal. And less. Less what? She considered. Less real. He held her gaze for a long moment. I'll take that. You should, she said. It's the best thing I've said to you so far. You've said some memorable things. I tend to. The smallest thing happened. He smiled. Not the ghost of one. Not the careful management of an expression. An actual smile. Brief and real. and it changed his face entirely, and Seren decided then and there that this was an extremely dangerous development. "There is a room in the East Wing," he said. "It has its own door to the gardens. I had it prepared, but you are under no obligation to use it."
"I'll see it," she said.
"I'm not making any decisions yet." "I know. And the registry. I am already drafting amendments. No forced registration. Voluntary, with protections. Any Omega who comes forward will have legal status, guaranteed safety, the right to refuse any household assignment." She studied him. "And how did your advisors take that?" "About as well as you'd expect," he said dryly. "And you did it anyway." "I did." She was quiet for a moment. "All right," she said finally. "I'll see the room." She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the frame. "Caius." "Yes. The pig pen story. Does everyone know?" "Brennan knows," he said. "He has told everyone." "Good," she said. "It was an excellent decision on my part, and I would like it acknowledged." She left. He stood in the war room, surrounded by his maps and his responsibilities, and thought, "Yes, absolutely. This is going to be the most complicated thing that has ever happened to me." He also thought, and he kept this one very quietly, good.
Chapter 5.
She stayed. Not with any formal announcement or declaration. She simply stayed, and the palace adjusted around her the way a living thing adjusts to something new in its environment, with some resistance and then, gradually, with acceptance. The court was less graceful about it. The court of Duskmere was a collection of noble houses and advisors and council members who had very specific ideas about how things should work, and an unregistered Omega taking up residence in the palace. Even the East Wing, even informally, was not on their list of acceptable things. The whispers started within the week. Seren heard them, because she heard everything, and she catalogued them with the same patient efficiency she applied to everything else. They called her a wolf without a pack, an Omega without rank or lineage, a problem that had wandered in from the countryside and made itself at home in the king's house. They used the word beneath quite a lot in quite a lot of different arrangements. She responded to this by doing exactly what she had always done, which was nothing that they expected. She learned the palace. Not the formal routes, the servants' passages, the back stairs, the places where the stone was warm from the kitchens below, and the places where the wind came through in winter and needed to be blocked with tapestries. She talked to the stable hands and the laundry women and the guards on the night rotation, and they talked back because she asked the right questions and listened to the answers. She found the palace healer, an old beta woman named Isra, who was aggressively competent and deeply unimpressed by rank, and spent 3 afternoons in the infirmary asking questions, because she had learned herb lore in the forest out of necessity and wanted to know what she didn't know. "You're the Omega," Isra said, the first time, looking at her over a workbench covered in dried plants. "I'm an Omega," Seren said. "Not the one." Isra had looked at her for a long moment and then said, "Do you know comfort from foxweed?" "Yes." "Can you set a bone?" "I've set my own." "Does that count?" "Sit down," Isra said. She came back every afternoon after that. Caius noticed. He noticed because he paid attention to what happened in his palace, and because the bond meant he always knew, in the low and wordless way of the mate bond, approximately where she was and in what state. He had not told her this. He suspected she already knew. She came to the war room some evenings, not by invitation. She was simply there when he arrived, standing at the map table, looking at something with that focused intensity she applied to anything she found interesting. The first time, he had stopped in the doorway. "The border with the northern reaches," she said, without looking up. You have 3 garrison positions here, here, and here. There's a route through the Blackwood that none of them can see. We know about the Blackwood route, he said. Then why is there no watch post at the ridge? He came to stand beside her at the table. She was pointing at a spot he had, in fact, discussed with Brennan 3 months ago and then deprioritized because of the registry complications.
Costs, he said.
Less costly than a flank attack, she said. That's what Brennan said. She looked up, briefly, sideways. Then you have sensible people, and you should listen to them. I generally do, he said. And occasionally they are surprised by my interest in pigpen strategy. She looked at him. There it was, the edge of something, not quite a smile, close enough to matter. I lived in those woods for 3 years, she said, turning back to the map. There is another route here. The river curves and there's a crossing that isn't marked. Local Omegas use it. No one else knows.
He looked at the map.
Then at her.
How
do you know this? Because I was one of the local Omegas, she said simply. We know things. We always know things. No one ever bothers to ask. He was quiet for a moment. I'm asking, he said. She looked at him, and this time she didn't look away immediately. I know, she said. The court made their move in the 2nd month. It came in the form of Lady Vera, the head of one of the oldest noble houses in Duskmere, who requested an audience with the king and used it to suggest, with the elegant indirectness of someone who has been being indirect for 60 years, that perhaps the king's household would benefit from an appropriate Omega companion of noble birth, and that perhaps the current arrangement in the East Wing was causing comment. Caius let her finish. Then he said, very calmly, Thank you, Lady Vera. I'll take it under advisement. She left. He told Brennan what had been said. Brennan, who had served him for 8 years and survived everything else, said, My lord, you should know that Seren knows. The servants talk, and she listens to the servants. Caius went to find her. She was in the gardens, the ones accessible from the East Wing door, her door, sitting on the low stone wall that bordered the lavender beds, with her knees up and her back to the palace, looking at the sky. The moon was up, early and pale in the still-lit evening, and it turned the lavender gray. He sat beside her. Not close. A respectable distance. Lady Vera came to see you, she said. Yes. She thinks I'm a problem. She thinks I should have a politically advantageous Omega companion of appropriate bloodline, he said. She's not entirely wrong, Seren said. From a governance standpoint. He looked at her profile. From a governance standpoint, he said, perhaps not. I don't have bloodlines, she said. I don't have a pack. I can't offer you an alliance or a political connection or any of the things that a king's mate should bring. What can you offer? He said. She turned to look at him, and there was something in her expression that was not quite vulnerable. She was rarely that he was learning, not because she was cold, but because she had survived too much to wear vulnerability easily. But there was something that was close to it. Something open. I can tell you when you're wrong, she said. And mean it. And have you know that I'm not afraid of you when I say it. A pause. You can offer that, he said. I already have been, she said. Have you noticed? Yes, he said. And, he said, I have not had someone tell me I was wrong about anything in approximately 3 years. She raised an eyebrow. Brennan tries, he said, but he does it diplomatically. It softens the impact. I will never soften the impact, she said. I know, he said. He stopped. It's what? He looked at the moon, at the lavender, at her hands, folded on her knees, the knuckles slightly scarred. He thought about 7 years alone, and a garden in Ashwood, and a 12-year-old with a cloth doll, and 2 units of royal soldiers redirected into pig pens. "It's what I need," he said. The evening was very quiet around them. "Lady Vera is going to keep making noise," Seren said. "Let her," he said. "It will cause problems for you." "Most worthwhile things do," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. The bond hummed between them, warm now, not the demanding, frantic pull of those first days, but something steadier, like an ember rather than a spark. "I still haven't decided," she said. "I know. I'm not saying yes to anything. I'm saying I'm still here." "I know that too," he said. "Still here is enough." She turned back to the sky. He turned back to the sky. They sat on the garden wall in the fading light with exactly the right amount of distance between them, and it was, in the way of things that matter, enough. Chapter 6. The attempt on his life came on a night in the 3rd month, which was also the night everything changed between them. It was not a sophisticated plot. The most dangerous ones rarely are. A kitchen servant named Colm, who had been placed in the palace 8 years ago by a surviving member of the Hollow Council, put something in the king's evening wine that should have worked. It had worked on 2 other kings before, apparently. It did not work on Caius, because Seren, who trusted nobody's wine that she had not seen poured, had smelled something wrong from across the room when the cup was brought, and had knocked it out of his hand with an expression of such casual certainty that the entire table had gone silent. She had looked at the cup on the floor, and then at Colm and said, "That one." And Colm had run, which was how they all knew she was right. They caught him before he reached the gate. Caius stood in the great hall after the chaos had quieted, and he thought about what would have happened if she had not been there, if she had been across the room, if she had been in the East Wing, if he had dismissed her the way a certain kind of man would have dismissed her months ago. Too inconvenient, too unranked, too much, and the thought moved through him like cold water. He found her in the corridor outside. She was leaning against the stone wall, arms crossed, with the specific posture of someone who has been running on adrenaline and is only now allowing themselves to feel the weight of it. "Seren," he said. She looked up. She was, and he could see it clearly now, the careful composure just slightly frayed at the edges, shaking. Very slightly. The minute, involuntary tremor of someone who has just been very frightened and is deeply unwilling to say so. He crossed the distance between them. He did not ask. He simply put his hands on her shoulders, carefully, firmly, the way you steady someone who does not want to be treated as if they are fragile, and said, "You're all right." "I know I'm all right," she said, voice flat. "So am I," he said. A pause. "I know that too," she said, very quietly. "Seren."
"Don't," she said.
"Don't what?" "Don't," she stopped. She looked at his collar instead of his face. "I was afraid."
"For you."
I don't do that. I don't have people to be afraid for, that's not." "It's all right," he said. "It's inconvenient," she said fiercely. He looked down at her, at the dark hair and the fierce jaw and the eyes that were trying very hard to be the color of stone and were instead the color of everything she felt. "Yes," he said. "It is." She looked up at him then, at his face, at the gold eyes that she had been cataloging for 3 months and thought she understood, and now, in this corridor, in the aftermath of the worst 30 minutes of her year, found she was looking at as if for the first time. "You were going to drink it," she said. "Yes. You were just going to sit there and drink it and not smell anything wrong." "My senses aren't." "You are the king," she said, with a fierceness that had something else underneath it entirely. "You cannot just drink things without thinking." I'll add it to the list, he said, right after listening to Brennan about the Ridge Watch post. She stared at him. And then, because she was furious, because she was relieved, because 3 months of carefully maintaining the right distance had taken a great deal of effort, and she was very tired of effort, she grabbed the front of his coat and kissed him. It lasted approximately 2 seconds. She pulled back. They looked at each other. That, she said carefully, was not a decision. Of course not, he said, and his voice was extremely steady for someone whose heart was currently doing something that had never been in the official king's training. That was relief, he offered. Adrenaline, she said. Absolutely. We will not speak of it. Not at all, he agreed. She released his coat. She smoothed it with the precise care of someone who needs to do something with their hands. Good, she said. Good, he said. She walked back toward the east wing. She had gone perhaps 10 steps when she heard him say, very quietly, to no one in particular, adrenaline. She did not turn around, but she also did not try to hide the smile. Chapter 7. The Hollow Council's remnants came in force 1 month later. There were 40 of them, soldiers, mercenaries, men who had survived the rebellion and nursed their hatred for 4 years and now saw, in the political instability caused by the Omega Registry's amendment, an opportunity. They came at night. They came through the Blackwood crossing that was not on any royal map. They came through the one that Seren had told Caius about. He had, following her advice and Brennan's persistent advocacy, placed a watch post at the ridge 2 weeks prior. The watch post saw them coming. The warning bells rang. The palace gates closed. The royal guard mobilized. But 40 men against palace walls and a prepared guard was not the crisis. The crisis was the 6 who had already slipped inside, through the river crossing in the old section of the wall, through the unmapped gate that even Seren had not known about, because it was a secret that the old regime had kept very carefully. They were looking for the king. They found Seren instead. She was in the corridor outside the war room because she had heard the bells and was already moving, not toward safety but toward the sound, which was either brave or foolish, and she had never been clear on the distinction. She came around a corner and ran directly into 2 armed men, and there was a very brief and very violent moment in which she learned that 7 years in the Blackwood forest had, in fact, prepared her reasonably well for this exact situation. She took one down with the wall and the other with his own weapon. She was reaching for the door of the war room when the 3rd one caught her arm, and this one was larger, and she was already tired, and the next moment was very complicated and ended with her back against the stone and a blade at her throat, and the world going very, very still. The man holding her was not going to kill her immediately. He needed her for leverage. She could see it in his eyes, the calculation, the recognition that a living Omega was useful and a dead one was not. He was going to use her to get to Caius. She thought about Caius. She thought about the corridor outside the great hall, and a coat she had grabbed, and a smile she had not been supposed to see. She thought about maps and lavender and Pip and her cloth doll and Dessa walking east with her purposeful stride. She thought, not today. She broke the hand holding the blade. This was extremely painful for both of them, and she was not going to think about the details later. What she was going to think about was this. She was still standing. She was still standing when Caius came through the door. He had clearly fought his way through the other 3, which was, she would note, later, much later, when everything had settled, impressive. He came through the door already shifting, the gold of his wolf bleeding into his eyes, and he took in the corridor in 1 second, the 2 men down, the 3rd man with the broken hand, and Seren, upright, armed, bleeding from a cut along her cheek that she had not noticed, furious. He stopped. She could see him running the calculus. She had seen him do it in the war room, that rapid assessment of every variable. I'm fine, she said. I can see that, he said, and his voice was completely even, which she now understood meant he was absolutely not fine. The rest of them? Contained. How many casualties? Brennan's unit is handling, Seren. Your face. It's fine. It's bleeding. Most things that bleed are fine, she said. It's the ones that don't that are the problem. He crossed the corridor. He was very close. He reached up and very gently, and the gentleness was somehow more startling than anything else that had happened that evening, touched the cut on her cheek, cataloging it, checking. She let him. You came through the Blackwood crossing, he said. They came through it, she said. I was already inside. They knew about the crossing. Yes. She met his eyes. But you had the Ridge Watch, which is why we had warning. He looked at her for a long moment. Which is why we had warning, he agreed. They were very close. The bond was not pulling. It was simply there, full and settled and warm, the way it had never quite been in all the months of careful distance. She was suddenly aware that she was tired in every part of herself. Not the adrenaline kind, the deep kind. Caius, she said. Yes. I've made a decision, she said. He was very still. I'm done, she said. With the carefully managed distance, with the appropriate amount of space and the not deciding and the all of it. She stopped, looked at him directly. I'm done. Done, he said carefully. In which direction? She looked at him, at the gold eyes and the tired face, and the king who had ridden to a market town personally for reasons that had nothing to do with politics, who had amended his own law when she told him it was wrong, who sat on garden walls in the evening and meant it when he said still here is enough. In the direction, she said, where I stop pretending I don't know exactly what I want. He exhaled. Something released in him, that constant weight, visibly, like a man setting down armor he has worn so long he forgot it was heavy. And, what do you want? He said. Something real, she said. Not a bond, not a law, not a political arrangement or a palace room or a title. Something real. I can do real, he said quietly. You'd better, she said. I've been paying attention for 3 months, and my standards are very specific. The ghost of a smile, the real one underneath it, breaking through. I know, he said. You've mentioned the pig pen on at least 4 separate occasions. It was a strong tactical decision, and I stand by it. He took her hand, carefully. The way he did everything, with that deliberate precision that she had learned was not coldness but care, the way a person handles things that matter. Seren of Ashwood, he said. Caius of Duskmere, she said. I have been king for 4 years, he said, and I have not once in that time done something I could not justify on a list of political reasons. And, she said, and I can't justify this on any list, he said. I would like very much to stop trying. She looked at him. He looked at her. The moon came through the high window of the corridor and laid a pale stripe across the stone floor between them, and the bond sang low and warm and entirely without urgency, like something that is all the time in the world because it has already arrived. She kissed him again. This time it was not 2 seconds. This time it was not adrenaline. And this time, neither of them said a word about what it was or wasn't. They rebuilt the Omega Registry from the ground. It took the better part of a year, and it was neither simple nor painless, and there were council members who threatened to leave, and some who actually did, and one very memorable morning meeting during which Seren, who had, by this point, a formal role that no one had a precise title for, and everyone had decided to simply call the King's Council, told the assembled nobles of Duskmere that they could object to the new protections, or they could explain their objections to her directly, and she was happy to hear any of it. No one explained anything to her directly. The new law gave every Omega in Duskmere legal personhood, the right to own property, the right to refuse bonding, the right to be registered, not assigned, to households that they chose. It was not perfect. No law is perfect on the first draft. But it was a beginning. Dessa came back. She had established, in the Eastern Territories, a kind of informal network for displaced Omegas, and she wanted to make it official, and she came to the palace to make her case, and spent 3 hours with Seren going over the details, and then met the king and said, with a frankness that had never abandoned her, "You're less terrible than I expected." Caius said, with a perfect seriousness, "Thank you." Dessa looked at Seren. Seren shrugged. "He grows on you." Pip wrote letters. Her handwriting improved over the year and her questions became more sophisticated, and she signed every one of them. "Pip, who you helped, just so you remember." Seren kept every letter. Brennan, who had started the year with quite a lot of gray hair, ended it with considerably more, and said once, only once in private, with the careful delivery of a man who has chosen his moment, that he was glad she had stayed. She said, "Don't get sentimental, Brennan. It doesn't suit the expression." He said, "It absolutely does not," and walked away before she could see him smile. On a night in the first cold month of the new year, when the first snow had come and the palace grounds were white and quiet, Caius and Seren stood at the window of the war room, which had become, over the year, somewhat their room, by virtue of the maps and the evenings and the arguments about strategy that were also, somehow, something else, and looked at the moon. It was full, white and enormous and entirely self-satisfied, the way the moon always is when it is full. "She's pleased with herself," Seren said. "The moon? She always is. When things go the way she intended." Caius looked at her profile. The cut on her cheek had healed to a thin silver line that she had decided she liked. She was wearing the deep green of the palace colors, which she had put on one day without comment and not taken off since, and she still stood the way she always had, balanced, alert, the posture of someone who is always ready for the next thing. "Are you?" he said. She turned to look at him. "Am I what?" "Pleased," he said, "with how things went." She considered this for a long moment. The moon came through the window and lay silver across the maps on the table, across the room that had been a war room and was becoming something more. "Ask me again in 20 years, she said. He raised an eyebrow. "I'll have better data," she said. He laughed. An actual laugh. Not the diplomatic version, not the managed version, but the real one, low and warm, the kind that meant you have let something in that you can no longer keep out. She watched him. She thought, "I did not choose this. I would not have chosen this. I would have chosen something sensible and manageable and completely without a king attached to it." She thought, "The moon gives and the moon takes, and sometimes, just to amuse herself, she does both at once." She thought, "I know, now, what the second part of that feels like." She leaned into him, just slightly, the way she had learned to lean into things she had decided to keep. He put his arm around her, carefully, the way he did everything that mattered. Outside, the snow fell on Duskmere. The wolves in the forest howled at the moon in the ancient language of things that know who they are and where they belong. Seren listened. She did not howl back. But for the first time in 7 years, she understood what they were saying.